parents are under lawful custody, having in mind that Article 53 of the Constitution provides for the rights of children, including the right to free and compulsory basic education. Further aware that the Section 22 of the Person Deprived of Liberty Act and the Child Care Policy provides for the care of a child whose parent is deprived of liberty until the child attains the age of 4 years, recognizing that children above the age of 4 years are still require parental support. Also, the national policy on deworming of school-going children, the motion by Honorable Mashua Waithaka, urges the national government through the Ministry of Health to develop a national policy on deworming school-going children as a crucial part of mainstreaming of healthcare access in the country. In accordance to Article 43(1) of the Constitution, that provides that every person has the right to the highest attainable standard of health, including the right to healthcare services. Further aware that the relationship between health and education plays a significant role in school attendees' rates, it is concerned that the negative effects of poor sanitation, such as parasite infestations, particularly among school-going children, lead to anemia, stunted growth, and other salient problems, which in turn leads to low school attendance and impact education standards. Recognizing that according to research, a school-based deworming is one of the most co-effected interventions that provides a huge range of holistic and social benefits. Also, there is a motion on public health concerns at Langata Cemetery by the Member of Parliament of Langata constituency, Honorable Felix Odiwar, that the House urges the national government through the Ministry of Health to urgently conduct an assessment of the public health risk posed by the continued use of Langata Cemetery and to institute mitigatory measures and collaborate with other stakeholders, including the Nairobi City County government, to identify suitable alternative land for the use of a cemetery. This having in mind that Article 42 of the Constitution provides for the right of every person to a clean and healthy environment. Further aware that Article 69 of the Constitution obligates the state to ensure sustainable utilization of the environment and natural resources, including land, recognizing that the fourth schedule to the Constitution assigns to the national government the function of land planning, including the general principles of land planning and coordination of the planning by counties, as well as matters of health policy, and further recognizing that there is ongoing public outcry regarding the neglect of Langata Public Cemetery, which was declared full close to 2 years, 2 decades, approximately 20 years ago. Also, a motion by Honorable Mark Mwenje on the development and implementation of a program for voluntary regularization of land occupied by squatters for a prescribed period. The House resolved that the government develops and implements a policy for voluntary regularization of land occupied by squatters for a prescribed period, including negotiation for financial settlements across the country to address the challenges facing the said squatters. Also, the motion on expansion of drug, substance abuse and rehabilitation centers by Honorable John McCarley. It urges the government to institute intensive programs for the dissemination of information on alcohol and substance abuse in line with the Alcoholic Drinks Control Act 2010 and to increase the number of rehabilitation centers across the counties. Aware that according to the National Protocol for the Treatment of Substance Use Disorders in Kenya by the Ministry of Health, drug abuse has been increasing in Kenya, especially among the youth, the statistics including the more than half of drug users at the age between 10 and 19. Further, also aware that research released by the National Authority for the Campaign Against Drug Abuse, NACADA, in December last year, 2022, placed Western Region as the leading region in alcohol and substance abuse at 23.8%, followed by the coastal region at 13.9%, and the central region of Kenya, 11.9%. Recognizing that the higher level of drug abuse in the western region is attributed to illegal entry points from the neighboring countries and unlicensed establishments, especially in Bungoma County and Busia County, with statistics indicating 2 of every 5 establishments in Bungoma operates illegally. Also, a majority of the consumers of illegal substances are school-going children who end up dropping out of school, cognizant of the fact that Alcoholic Drinks Control Act of 2010 established that the Alcoholic Drinks Control Fund, whose purpose is to, among other things, facilitate the dissemination of information on alcoholic drinks and promote rehabilitation programs in the country. Also, Member of Parliament Honorable Kirima has a motion on banning the growing of eucalyptus trees in the country. He says, having in mind that the House resolves that the national government through the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry.
No, come back.
Okay, the House resolves that the national government through the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry orders absolute banning of planting eucalyptus trees and encourages planting of indigenous species across the country. Also orders the uprooting of all eucalyptus trees and replacements with other variety of trees, particularly indigenous species, to ensure observation and conservation of water sources and to preserve the ecosystem. Also to initiate the process of putting in place punitive measures against persons who defy the orders. Having in mind that the eucalyptus species are popular among large and commercial tree farmers in Kenya, noting that these tree species are grown in most ecological zones in the country, in particular in the western central Rift Valley, central Kenya, parts of eastern and the coastal regions of the country. Thus, acknowledging that the farming of these eucalyptus trees has been on the rise due to their fast growth, good economic returns, diverse commercial uses such as transmission poles, fuel wools, timber, plywood, pulp, fencing posts, building material, among others. Also, we have a motion on the establishment of the strategic grain storage reservoirs and silos in close proximity to the smallholders farmers. The motion brought by Jessica Mbalu, the Member of Parliament. The House now resolves that the government, through the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development, establishes strategic grain storage reservoirs and silos in close proximity to smallholders farmers so to address post-harvest inefficiencies. Having in mind that agriculture is the backbone of Kenya's economy, contributing approximately 33% of the GDP and employing more than 40% of the total population and 70% of the rural population, noting that sector's performance has been declining as a result of adverse effects of climate change, resulting in drought, famine, and food insecurity. Also, small-holding farming is predominantly rain-fed cereal grain farming, and farmers experience boom harvest every time there is an adequate rain. Also today, the House is expected to consider the motion by Omulker Kasim, the motion on policy on integrating a curriculum for environmental conservation in primary and secondary school. The House resolved that the government through the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry develops and implements a policy on integrating a curriculum for environmental conservation in primary and secondary schools in the country. According to Article 42 of the Constitution, it accords that every person's right to clean and healthy environment. The Constitution also mandates the state to encourage public participation in the management, protection, conservation of the environment. It is concerned with the prevailing climate change and global warming that has adversely affected our ecosystem and biodiversity, causing unprecedented drought, food security, and famine. Also, The motion by Honorable Peter Selassie on regulation of the sugar industry to discourage branding of sugar by non-millers. The House resolves that the government, through the Ministry of Trade, Investments and Industry, ensures the strict operationalization of the regulatory frameworks governing sugar importation into the country. As it's aware that the importation and exportation of sugar is regulated by various laws, including that of Crops Act and Agriculture and Food Authority Act of 2013. Agriculture and Food Authority is charged with the responsibility of regulating an importation of exportation of sugar in the country in accordance with the law. It's noted that the importation of sugar is also negotiated within the regional trade blocs, frameworks and agreements to enable country to meet the demand of sugar. There is also the policy for provincial of mental health services in all health facilities motion brought by Honorable Mishimboko that urges the national government through the Ministry of Health to collaborate with county government to adopt a policy of health services. And now the quorum has been achieved. I hand over to the plenary.
Order, members. Kindly halt the ringing of the bell. We have the required numbers.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions. Order number 5, papers.
Majority Leader.
Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Wednesday, 26th July 2023, morning sitting. Number 1, under order number 5, the following papers will be laid on the table of the House by the Deputy Majority Whip. Reports of the Auditor General and financial statement in respect of the following constituencies for the year ended 30th June 2022 and the certificates therein. A. Kipkelion East, B. Kipkelion West, C. Embakasi West, D. Embakasi Central, E. West Mugirango, F. South Imenti, G. Suba South, H. Suba North, I. Dagoretti North, J. Kitui East, K. Kitui West, L. Kitui Central, M. Kitui South, N. Kitui Rural, O. Pokot South, P. Mwingi South, Q. Kirinyaga Central, R. Bomet Central, S. Kajiado West, T. Narok West, U. Koresoi South, V. Luanda, W. Mount Elgon, X. Langata, Y. Mutungulu, and Z. Mwala. Madam Speaker, I lay.
Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion. Order number 7, question and statements. Order number 8, motion, development of a policy and funding for junior secondary schools. Question to be put.
Order, members. I now put the question that, aware that communities have continuously established learning institutions within their localities to address the inadequate physical facilities to support the attainment of universal access to education, noting that the Kenya Vision 2030 envisioned progressive establishment of more schools, expansion and rehabilitation of existing ones in order to improve access to education, further noting that huge sums of funds, particularly under the National Government's Constituencies Development Fund, NGCDF, have been invested in improving infrastructure in primary schools, acknowledging that in the recently introduced competency-based curriculum CBC education system, pupils will transition from primary school at class 6 and not class 8, as was the case under the 844 system, concerned that basing junior secondary school JSS in selected primary school will render classroom facilities that previously housed classes 7 and 8 redundant, and that the arrangement would compel students to travel for longer distances to access institutions where junior secondary schools are based. Further concerned that the guidelines recently issued by the government directed that junior secondary schools be domiciled in the existing primary schools, yet most primary schools lack the capacity to accommodate the effectively offer junior secondary school curriculum. Deeply concerned that the guidelines were hurriedly developed and operationalized, this House urges the Ministry of Education to, 1, urgently develop a comprehensive junior secondary school policy in order to regularize and anchor the guidelines under the Basic Education Act 2012 to ensure that junior secondary schools are established and operated in every primary school, and 2, develop a clear implementation framework for the competency-based curriculum at junior secondary school level and provide for a funding plan for successful implementation of the curriculum. Will as many as are of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as are of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Order number 9, the Higher Education Loans Board Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 58 of 2022, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Higher Education Loans Board Act 1995. Order number 10, the Penal Code Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 56 of 2022, second reading.
This bill has a balance of 2 hours and 43 minutes. Could the clerk confirm whether anyone was on their feet? No. Was it seconded? Okay. So we'll give the first opportunity to the member for Mbeere North, Honorable Geoffrey Roku. Honorable Murugara, you have an intervention? Member for Mbeere North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this amendment by Honorable David Gekaria. The penal code need to be put into alignment as far as the written intent of the Constitution 2010 is concerned. You find that most of the Public Order Act clauses, majority of them are not well aligned, and it is good that the member has noted the need to move an amendment to ensure some of the demeanors which are occasioned within our society are well taken care of. And these demeanors also, some of them require some form of punishment in case you go overboard. And I have seen this amendment is a quite funny one, because it talks about even the issues to do with the prostitution. And we should not be a society which is encouraging prostitution. We should be a society which is fighting some of these vices in our society. I therefore, Madam Speaker, support this amendment by the member of Nakuru. Thank you.
Thank you. Member for Tharaka.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support the proposed amendment to the Penal Code by the Honorable David Gekaria, with the sole intention of repealing Section 182 of the Penal Code, which is Chapter 63 of the Laws of Kenya. Madam Speaker, when we used to be law students, we had a class of laws we would call an anachronistic cobweb of laws derived from the colonial government, and some of them through the famous reception clauses. These are laws which we as Africans could not understand what they were, because they used to be laws in another country, and by virtue of some date in our laws, they became laws applicable to our country. When we talk about idle and disorderly persons, what exactly are we talking about? Because the idea of introducing Section 182 through Act number 40 of 1952 was to try and get Africans from gathering in a manner which the white man could not understand. This was during the emergency period, and anytime Africans were seen in a group, they would imagine they were plotting on how to execute the rebellion, which was in the country that time, the Mau Mau rebellion. Therefore, we had several categories of people who were lumped together as being idle and disorderly, as a result of which you would actually get punished through a court of law, go to prison for about a month, or a fine of not more than 100 shillings. And this is why this should actually be repealed. Because why would anybody today be fined less than 100 shillings for doing any of the things that are set out here? This tells you that we have a lot of dead letter laws in our statutes, including the Penal Code, which needs to be repealed. One such dead letter law is actually this one of idle and disorderly persons. It is totally demeaning. It is condescending for anyone to term the other one as a prostitute. While today we have better terms which we use, including commercial sex workers and such other terminology, but to call somebody a prostitute is demeaning. It should actually not be entertained in our statute books. What exactly is indecent manner? We need a definition of what is indecency, because we may know what, or we may purport to know what a public place is, but a nightclub or those refreshment areas where people go at night are public places. The mode of dress in those areas is in consonance with those areas, and therefore why would a lady be selected to be told you are indecently dressed or exposing yourself? There is number B, which says every person causing, procuring, or encouraging any other person to beg or gather for alms. Again, this is totally un-African. Africans have no problem, especially when there is drought, with moving from one household to another and asking for food reliefs. Is that begging? Does anybody who tells the other one to do it so that they do not starve to death, are they encouraging idle and disorderly conduct? And we also have poor people, vulnerable, those who are less privileged, blind, disabled. Is this disorderly conduct if they do this? So, having gone down through the entire statute, including every person who publicly conducts himself in a manner likely to cause a breach of the peace. Again, what is to conduct yourself in a manner likely? We need a definition of that, because we've just been seeing what were called mandamanos recently, and we were told they were lawful, they were constitutional. And pickets, we know for sure those may be. But we were told that those who are doing those mandamanos were conducting themselves in a manner that was contrary to the law, including a breach of the peace. Again, we need a definition of this so that we do not lump everybody together. So looking at this proposed amendment, I do support that we actually repeal this, and we should be looking at the Penal Code entirely, all of it, so that all the dead letter laws that are in there, all the laws that were brought in purely to try and curb what was then African freedom should actually be removed so that we also are able to reach where other societies have reached today. So with those remarks, I do support the repeal of Section 182 of the Penal Code, Chapter 63 of the laws of Kenya. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Honorable Phyllis Barto Moiben. You're not willing to speak on this one? All right. Honorable Joseph Munyoro, MP for Kigumo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I rise to support the motion by Honorable Gekaria on repealing of the Penal Code, because this is especially the issue of idle and disorderly. It cannot be defined properly, and it's been abused, especially to arrest our young people in shopping centers. And being jobless does not mean that you are idle. It does not mean that you are disorderly. And like Honorable Murugera is saying, these are laws that were basically made to emasculate the black person so that we are not able to congregate together, we are not able to speak with one voice. And I think it's the right time to repeal the section. When you say about a person causing or procuring or encouraging any person to beg or gather for alms, and we know our society, there are very many people who are in need, in dire need. And it's an African for you to turn people away if they are hungry and they don't have food. I don't think that should be criminalized. And we've suffered thoroughly from drought, from famine, and telling people not to go and beg might be putting issues that we do not understand into our society. So I am also for that reason, I think it should be appealed. There is another clause E which says that every person who without lawful excuse publicly does in any indecent act, this needs to be defined. We have societies that, for example, the people who dress in shukas, how do you define such people? Because this is our culture. And I think it's important that the law is clear so that it's not used to abuse or disenfranchise some people. We've also not been very clear when we say that someone is likely to behave in a manner likely to cause a breach of the peace. Exactly what that means. Is it shouting? Is it fighting in public? I don't know. We need the definition. So I stand to support this. And we need to look at the law and the penal code so that we know areas that are really not serving any purpose other than trying to emasculate, trying to oppress our people, and laws that were made by the colonialists so that they could be able to handle us. So I think, for me, I support, and it's something that should be done. Thank you.
Member for Kiamba, Honorable John Kawanjiku.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise to support the appeal of this penal code because I think for the longest time possible we have been dealing with, ordinarily the traditional or the colonial laws that were, imposed on us. I think it is also high time for us as a country to sit down and appeal some of these penal codes because with the society we are in and the country that we have now, the civilization that is also coming around, the issue of, being densely populated in terms of gathering and how do we define, some of the issues like, idle and disorderly person. How do you even define such a kind of a person within the Kenya we are living today? So I therefore believe, Madam Speaker, it is high time we appeal this penal code. We make sure that even if it's the issue of gathering and even some of the issues that we have experienced lately, that people are gathered discussing, and maybe probably there is lack of unemployment within our country. And you realize that probably our young people will gather within a certain village trying to discuss, or maybe even the bunge ya wananchi that we have been having within the country. How do you define disorder, Madam Speaker? So I feel that it is high time we also support this motion. We appeal some of those penal code, and we make sure that we come up with better laws that will help to facilitate our young people, our and the people within the society who will be able, at the end of the day, to be lawful in terms of what they are subjecting themselves into, Madam Speaker. The issue of, gathering, the issue of maandamano that we have also experienced, Madam Speaker, we cannot necessarily say, because there is also the part that the government should play, the issue of making sure that it creates employment to our young people in terms of creating, industrialization within our society, Madam Speaker, so that we can now be able to deal with what we are defining as a hydra, Madam Speaker. There is also where they are saying that every person calls procuring or encouraging any person to beg or gather arms. We must also be able to tell what is this thing that we are defining or we are calling idol, Madam Speaker. Every person who in any public place solicit for immoral purposes. We cannot be able to tell by the definition of such a penal code without really coming out clear and defining that what is it we are also doing to rise against or to help the people who are idle within our society, Madam Speaker. So therefore I rise and I support, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Honorable Njeri Maina, member for Kirinyaga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was just telling Honorable Roko that he needs to vacate so that I can address the House. Honorable Speaker, as a member of Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, I rise to support repealing this penal code in collective nature, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I remember as a young student in Nairobi University, sometimes you'd just be walking from the main campus to law school and, cops would just bundle you into their car and say that you were loitering or walking in a disorderly manner, Honorable Speaker. We cannot afford to have a law in place that is vague, Honorable Speaker, because anything that is vague is prone to abuse, and like Honorable Kawanjiko has said, these are laws that were put in place during the colonial times to ensure that they sort of contain Africans. And I believe it is a high time we repeal the same so that we can ensure that we have laws in place that are progressive in nature and that cater for our communities. Thank you.
Member for Kitui West, Honorable Nyenze. Member for Sirisia, Honorable Aluke, also not in the House. I'm told Honorable Nyenze had spoken to this bill, and there being no further interest or more interest on this bill, this will close the debate and the mover will be called to reply.
Order number 11, motion, establishment of a National Cancer Prevention and Control Fund.
Member for Marakwet, Honorable Timothy Torotich. Order number 11 will be stood down for now. Next order.
Order number 12, motion, development and implementation of a child care program for children whose parents are in lawful custody.
The member supposed to move this motion, Honorable Brighton Yegon, also not in the House. And honorable members, if you have a motion on the order paper, be in the House or write to the Speaker.
Order number 13, motion, national policy on deworming of school-going children.
Honorable Mashua Waithaka, also not in. Quite unfortunate, also not in the House. Next order.
Order number 14, motion, public health concerns at Langata Cemetery.
Member for Kwanza, what is out of order?
Nothing so serious, Madam Speaker, but looking at the House and the mood of the House, you know, we need to get ideas and exchange ideas on each of these are very important motions.
Order,
And
member, honorable
so
member.
I was suggesting that.
Honorable member, member for Kwanza, this House is very serious on this debate, and I think the absence of these motions, standing them down does not mean they will not come on the order paper. They will still come on the order paper, so allow us to continue. Next order.
Order number 15, motion, development and implementation of a program for voluntary regularization of land occupied by squatters for a prescribed period.
This motion, did you not call order number 14? Okay. This motion to be moved by Honorable Mark Mwenje, also not in the House. Next order.
Order number 16, motion, expansion of drug and substance abuse rehabilitation centers.
Again, these are very serious motions. The movers not in the House. Honorable John McCarley also missing in the House.
Order number 17, motion, banning the growing of eucalyptus trees in the country.
To be moved by Honorable Moses Kirima, member for Imenti Central, also not in the House.
Order number 18, motion, establishment of strategic grain storage reserves and silos in close proximity to smallholder farmers.
To be moved by Honorable Jesse Kambalu, also not in the House.
Order number 19, motion, policy on integrating a curriculum for the environmental conservation in primary and secondary schools.
Honorable members, I think this is quite an embarrassing moment for the National Assembly. And the Speaker yesterday actually alluded to getting more time for private member bills and private motions, which we have slotted very well today in this morning. And even this one on education, on environment, to be moved by Honorable Umul Ker Kasim, still also not in the House.
Order number 20, motion, regulation of the sugar industry to discourage branding of sugar by non-millers.
Again, to be moved by Honorable Peter Salasia, also not in the House.
Order number 21, motion, introduction of comprehensive health education as a core subject in schools.
To be moved by Honorable Jane Maina, who is in the House. Take the floor.
Honorable Speaker, thank you. I rise to move a motion that aware that improving public health is a fundamental responsibility of the government, and it is imperative to address pressing health concerns faced by young people, including poor sexual and reproductive health, inadequate knowledge and information regarding sexual health, and protection against sexually transmitted infections. Concerned that the current state of adolescent health training programs is inadequate and fragmented, resulting in limited access to healthcare information and services by the youth in the country. Further concerned, as a result, young people face significant barriers in accessing comprehensive healthcare, cognizant that comprehensive sexual education through school-based programs, community-based programs, and healthcare facilities can promote healthy sexual practices amongst young people and reduce the spread of HIV/AIDS and other sexually transmitted infections, lower the incidences of teenage pregnancies, thus increasing school attendance and retention. Now, therefore, this House resolves that the national government, through the State Department of Basic Education, introduces comprehensive health, wellness, and sex education in the curriculum as a core subject in schools. Honorable Speaker, we must agree as a nation that young people of this nation do not have the right information when it comes to matters of health and sexual education. Honorable Speaker, I ran a campaign in Kirinyaga County dubbed the Triple Threats campaign, which was against teenage pregnancies, SGBV, and mental health. Honorable Speaker, what we unearthed from the campaign where we engaged professionals to talk to our young children in schools is something that is, I can say, very disheartening. Honorable Speaker, we are living in an era that is in the advent of social media, platforms that are purely unregulated by the government. We've seen in other developed nations like the UK, US, are now working on more stringent measures to ensure that they have contained access to information, because you find that some of these platforms offer very misleading information to our young people. And if our young people do not have the right information, they're very prone to think and believe what they see on these social platforms. Honorable Speaker, we live in a nation where we can say we have seen the church up in arms about the moral decay. Honorable Speaker, from where I stand, access to the right and the correct sexual information is not a question of morality, Honorable Speaker. It is a question of enabling our children to make the right decision when it comes to protecting themselves, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the education that is taught in the curriculum is not adequate enough to ensure that our children are empowered and not disempowered when it comes to protecting themselves. Honorable Speaker, we had a case in Kirinyaga County where the rate of STIs, or sexually transmitted infections, was so high amongst young people that it caused the national uproar, Honorable Speaker. And from where I stand, I'm asking myself, what are we doing about it? What is this House doing about it to protect the future of our children, Honorable Speaker? We can no longer afford to sit back and watch and fold our arms and expect the situation to resolve itself, Honorable Speaker. We cannot wish away social media, Honorable Speaker. We have seen the discussion. If you go to TikTok sometimes, there are very weird things going on around 12 a.m. midnight, Honorable Speaker, exposing our young children who, I repeat, do not have the right information. That is why I insist that, and I beg this House to resolve that we introduce comprehensive sexual and health education in the school curriculum so that we can empower our children, Honorable Speaker, to make the right decisions when it comes to protecting themselves, Honorable Speaker. We had the bill that had been proposed by this House in the last Parliament, Honorable Speaker. And you know, there was an uproar on social media that we are telling our children, engage in sex. We are not telling our children, engage in sexual activities. We are telling them, wait. We are telling them this is not the right time. We are telling them, if you ever find yourself in such a scenario, I do not want you to contract HIV and AIDS. I do not want you to contract an STI. I want you to first protect yourself. We are giving these children an option. We cannot bury our heads in the sand anymore, Honorable Speaker. I am therefore moving this motion, and I am asking Honorable Naomi Wako to second the same, Honorable Speaker, so that we can open the same for debate. Thank you.
Give me the mic. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I would want to thank Mheshimiwa for coming up with this motion. Mheshimiwa Jane Maina for coming up with this motion, introduction of comprehensive health education as core subject in schools. It is important, Madam Speaker, for us to deliberate on this. As I second this, I would want to give my contribution to this again, because it is important for us to debate on this, because issues to do with health is quite important, and it is the responsibility of the government to give every citizen equal opportunity, and every citizen has the right to the highest attainable standards of health, including the right to health care and services, and also under mental care, Madam Speaker. When we talk of health, many counties have benefited a lot from the colonial time to get the best health care in our county, in our country. But many counties suffer because they have been marginalized for the last many years, and they do not have even good hospitals and good health care centers. And as a result of that, many people have even lost their lives because they do not have that special care that they need to get. I congratulate Mheshimiwa Jen because of coming up with this, because today if you look at our school-going children, especially the young ones, they are exposed to a lot of social media, and they interact with a lot of things through their phones and through the phones of their parents. And as Africans, we avoid talking about sex and sex education because some of us feel that it is embarrassing to talk about that, and some of us feel that it is a taboo even to discuss that with our young children. And so they get exposed in many different ways, and some of them go to the extent of even practically practicing and getting into sexual practice while they are young. And so I support this because introduction of this at the education level, at the primary level, and at the different school levels, this will help our young people to understand the risks that are there. Today, Madam Speaker, in our county, in our country, we have so many young people who are teenage pregnancies, who are affected by teenage pregnancies, just because they have not been educated properly. If you look at the number, the percentage of young girls who have been impregnated while they're in school, while they're in primary school, they are quite high. And some of our counties have also suffered because of that, because we don't talk about that, we don't talk about the dangers. And when a girl of 14 years old is expectant, her education is interfered with, her future is ruined, and again, sometimes they are also infected with different diseases, some to the extent of even getting HIV/AIDS. And that is why today the rate of HIV/AIDS in our country is quite high compared to the past years, because today the age between 15 to 25 are the most affected people by this. So it is important for us to give this all the attention it deserves and make sure that we help our young people to understand and also prepare themselves. It is advisable to abstain from sex when you are young, so that at least you concentrate on your education. But today, you cannot fully say that. So in case you are not able to abstain, then it is good for us to educate our children well, so that they can be well equipped, they can be knowledgeable enough And even if they engage in sex, then they can do it wisely and prevent themselves and also protect their future. Madam Speaker, as we talk of that, you cannot avoid talking about mental health, because many of our young people today are depressed as a result of frustrations they have gone through. Some of the girls are depressed because of the sexual harassment in school, and not only by their age mates or their schoolmates, but even their lecturers, their teachers, and all these people. And normally, the girl is supposed to defend herself and refuse. But today, they are misled in many ways, such that they get into the problem, and at the end of the day, they get into depression. And so mental health care, again, is another area that we can focus on and say that in every school, we can also say that let us have counseling centers, counseling department, so that our school-going children, in case they have already been in that challenge and they have maybe been affected by that, then they can be counseled, they can get enough counseling, enough advice, so that they can overcome the challenge that they are in. And even make sure that in all the health centers, we can have the counseling center department, so that those who are suffering from mental health can also be taken care of. Sex education is very important, it is paramount, and it is better for us to educate our young people now. Prevention is better than cure, instead of us waiting to get into the problem, because we are already in a mess as a country. A lot of our young people, a lot of our young children are out of schools as a result of that. Many of them are infected and are affected by the challenge that they have encountered as a result of a lack of sex education. And it is high time for us as parents to see how best we can sit with our children, even before we think of the schools, to introduce that and have that in the curriculum. It is better for us, it is good for us to encourage every parent, because if we go back to our traditions and the traditional practice, whereby the parents, the grandparents sit with the children and just have some discussion in the evening. I know many people are busy these days, but during the holidays, it is good for us to introduce time to be with our families, time to be with our young ones, time to be with our grandchildren, and just talk on some of these important subjects, because our children are suffering because they have no knowledge on some areas, and no one is able to talk to them. Parents are too busy. The grandparents feel the children are more educated than them, and they have nothing to offer. It is high time for us to encourage grandparents and parents to sit with their children and go back to our cultural practices, whereby parents sit with their children, talk to them, and discuss everything. Even if initially, as Africans, we were avoiding to talk about sex and sex matters, it is high time now for us to open up and discuss those things with our children. If you just look at the rate of the young girls who are pregnant and out of schools, Madam Speaker, it is something that we seriously need to talk about so that we can salvage the situation. Where there is no vision, people perish. And visionary leaders, visionary parents talk of the future, the past, and the current. And today, people run after different things. We do different things and businesses. We have no time for our children. It is high time as a nation to come up with a culture of sitting with our children, not only on sex matters, but economy, marriage life, and all these other things. Madam Speaker, if you look at the marriage of many people today, young people are suffering because they cannot sustain. They cannot sustain because young men are not faithful, and girls get married to people and they get frustrated. They suffer in bringing up the children, and proper education, teaching our children the right thing to do at the right time. That is the only thing that can save our current situation and the situation that we are in. I support this and I second. I also congratulate Mheshimiwa Jane Maina for coming up with this very, very important motion to help the current generation and also to the coming generation that will be saved by this motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. I therefore propose the question that aware that improving public health is a fundamental responsibility of the government and it is imperative to address pressing health problems faced by young people, including poor sexual and reproductive health, inadequate knowledge and information regarding sexual health, and protection against sexually transmitted infections, concerned that the current state of adolescent health training programs is inadequate and fragmented, resulting in limited access to healthcare information and services by the youth in the country. Further concerned that, as a result of this, young people face significant barriers in accessing comprehensive healthcare, cognizant that comprehensive sexual education through school-based programs, community-based programs, and healthcare facilities can promote healthy sexual practices amongst young people and reduce the spread of HIV, stroke, AIDS, and other sexually transmitted infections, lower the incidences of teenage pregnancies, thus increasing school attendance and retention. Now, therefore, this House resolves that the national government, through the State Department of Basic Education, introduces comprehensive health, wellness, and sex education in the curriculum as a core subject in schools. The first opportunity will go to Honorable Phyllis Barto, member for Moiben.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise on behalf of my constituency, Moiben, in Uasin Gishu, to support the motion by Honorable Member Jane Maina from Kirinyaga on promoting a curriculum which involves sex education in Kenya. Madam Speaker, this particular policy has come of age in Kenya due to the fact that we are experiencing a great transformation in digitalization in Kenya, and young people, especially adolescents, get access to a lot of information way beyond their age. So it is important to introduce this education policy, this curriculum, to include sex education in the curriculum in our schools. Madam Speaker, if you visit each and every home currently where we have adolescent children, you will find that almost all of them have a mobile phone. They access internet, they access all manner of information on multiple issues, even including pornography, which they are not supposed to be exposed to. So to bring this, to navigate through this space, we should look at the curriculum in our schools. At the moment, the teachers and the curriculum is so packed with a lot of content, and little is paid attention. The scope pays at very small. The scope pays very or little attention to sexuality. Madam Speaker, we have adolescent children have a lot of challenges. For example, some don't understand the processes of their bodies, and this information needs to be given to them. Some even go through menstrual cycles without their knowledge. Some even get involved in sexual activities without their knowledge at a very young age. Research has shown that most of the Kenyan children have had 15, between most of the Kenyan children, between 15 to 19 years, almost 2% of them, 2% have had sexual experience. And some have ended up getting pregnant, some have ended up getting sexually transmitted diseases, and some have dropped out of school just because some did not have the advantage of getting information about the operations of their bodies. Our cultures have also changed. We no longer have situations where parents sit with their children to discuss cultural issues, sex matters included. So how do we alleviate such? The students stay in school most of the times. We have those who go to school from 5 in the morning and they come home very late in the evening. We have those who go to boarding at a very tender age and they remain in school throughout and they only come home for very few days or weeks. How will these children get to know about some issues which affect their bodies? The only way we can alleviate or intervene to this matter, Madam Speaker, is by bringing on board a curriculum which teaches them in their entirety on how their systems operate. We might be thinking about our culture and going back to our cultures where children and parents sit and converse about these issues. But, Madam Speaker, we have people who have migrated to urban areas who have been detached with their cultures, who no longer even understand, who no longer are connected to their traditional cultures. Also, Madam Speaker, sometimes it's not easy for a parent to sit with their children and discuss such issues, especially considering some parents still look at it as a taboo. We look at the scenario where we are talking about shaming, the period shaming, where it is still very difficult even for us to discuss menstruation of our girls publicly, or even for a girl to go to a supermarket and buy a sanitary pad, because in some cultures, or because they still feel it is something which is supposed to be normal, but it still feels embarrassing for other girls in other quarters, because possibly of their cultures, they are bringing their self-esteem and so many factors which surround a bringing of a child. So, Madam Speaker, I think in as much as it might take time to put this thing in the curriculum, how I wish we can start having conversations in schools. We can start having speakers visiting schools, sponsored by the Ministry of Education, going to various schools, educating, having a session in almost all schools in Kenya, educating our adolescents on matters sexuality. Because we even have, in as much as we are talking about pregnancy and other issues, even HIV is still a problem, Madam Speaker, because in the past it was seen as a problem which is sexually transmitted. We also, like you have sex, you get HIV. That conversation is still very prevalent in communities which are on the extreme parts of Kenya. It is not only a case of sexual transmission, but we have children who have been born and they were born by parents who are affected, and as a result, they are also having the same problem. How do we speak to them? Because their parents, some parents might not be having the courage